Joining us live now to discuss this and more is the Liberal Senator, the Victorian Liberal Senator Jane Hume. Jane, good to see you this morning. Let's just start off with your reaction on this Monday morning to those protests yesterday in Melbourne.
They were very confronting indeed, Pete. You know, we knew from the start, the moment that these protests were being organised, that there were some characters behind them that were unsavoury. Now, Australians have the right to peacefully protest, but peaceful is the operative word there. And police, unfortunately, were put in harm's way yesterday because those protesters got out of hand. Now, in Victoria, it does seem that it was the worst behaviour was seen. I'm not at all surprised. As Victoria, my home state and my hometown of Melbourne, seem to have turned into the protest capital of Australia. There have been numerous protests up and down the streets over the weekends, the pro-Palestinian protests. I think this has been somewhat of a backlash to those protests, which is a terrible shame, but there's no room for violence. We are a peaceful nation. We are a multicultural nation, a very successful one at that, and we should be embracing that.
When you say it's a terrible shame that those protests took place, I mean, like you point out, when you have these pro-Palestinian, anti-Israel protests in Melbourne every weekend, coupled with mass immigration, housing unaffordability, is this sort of pushback inevitable?
Well, there's frustration in Victoria, certainly, because economically we're so far behind the rest of the country. Our unemployment is higher, our antisocial behaviour is becoming more and more prevalent, crime is increasing. There is frustration that is brewing on the streets, and unfortunately I think some of that manifested yesterday in those anti-immigration protests and the pro-Palestinian counter-protests that were occurring at the same time. Unfortunately, though, it's police that are the ones that are caught in the middle. I want to thank the police officers in Victoria and indeed right around Australia for doing their job so well yesterday to try and keep those protests under control.
Folks will argue, and I'm sure that they're doing that already, folks will argue, why is this one so unacceptable, whereas the other one that happens every weekend, which shuts down cities, shuts down key bridges as well, is allowed to continue?
Well, all peaceful protests should be allowed to continue. The question is whether they are, the intention of those protests is to make a point or whether it is to make mayhem. And I think that yesterday we could see from the organisers that they intended to cause trouble. That is a real concern. But I speak every day to business owners, particularly those in the CBD, whose businesses have suffered because of the continual protests up and down, particularly around the top end of Bourke Street in front of Parliament House. There are a series of restaurants in particular and retail outlets there that are being damaged each week, that are being vandalised, whose customers are walking away because they don't want protests outside where they're supposed to be having a nice lunch.
So should they all be stopped?
Or shopping. That's outrageous. Well, there certainly needs to be something done. And look, the Victorian Coalition have already made moves to do that. They think that there should be permits to protest. I think that's a terrific idea and something that should be considered, because it's got to the stage now where Victoria is the protest state. That should be on our licence plates.
OK, let's get to Chris Bowen. He reckons 2030 emissions targets are achievable. 82% renewables by 2030. It's not very far away. Most experts believe that's not possible. Do you?
Well, that's what the experts are saying. In fact, there was one report last week that suggested that the Labor Party are around 7 years behind their renewable rollouts and that there's no way they're going to make their 2035 targets. I think some of the things that we saw last week at that Bush summit suggest that, the Labor are going to push ahead no matter what, even if they don't necessarily have the social licence to do so. And that's a real shame. You know, we want to see a net zero emissions future. We want to see low emissions in the future, but it doesn't come at any cost. And it seems to be at the cost of some people over others. So that seems to be the concern of the Bush summit. What I would like to see, though, first and foremost, is that the Liberal Party get behind hosting COP in 2026, because that's where we're going to see a showcase, essentially a trade fair of new technologies that would allow us to get to a net zero emissions future without so much of the damaging cost of the renewables rollout that is Labor's plan.
So you're for to keep the policy in play, net zero, to keep that in play, because your colleague Sarah Henderson said on Friday that you probably shouldn't now.
Well, I think there's different views around the party room. You just saw James Patterson being interviewed there, and airing that out in the party room is probably a good idea. It's really important that we get each one of those views on the table. But the electorate has told us time and time again that they want to see a lower emissions future.
Yeah.
They want to embrace net zero. And when the Liberal Party is putting together its policy platform, it should consider not just the seats that we hold, but the 33 that we need in order to form government. And those 33 electorates have said that they want a net zero emissions future.
So
the question, of course, then is how do we get there?
So should Andrew Hastie keep quiet about Barnaby Joyce's bill? Do you agree with Barnaby on that one, that he should?
I'm not going to get into conversations between Barnaby Joyce and Andrew Hastie, and unfortunately I'm in the Senate, so I won't get a chance to involve myself in that debate.
Yeah.
But if I were there, then I would certainly be asking for three things. One is that we settle on a net zero emissions future. This is really important because capital markets right around the globe require certainty. We want to see more investment in Australia in this space, and if we don't have policy certainty, we will miss out on those capital flows. The second thing we need to do, though, is firm up our renewable rollout with gas. We need more gas and we need it immediately. And finally, we need to see more transparency because, let's face it, Labor's renewable rollout is well behind, emissions are flatlining, and we don't know how much taxpayers are subsidising this. There are so many different programs out there, so many different agencies, and we have no idea exactly how much taxpayers
Should nuclear be gone, by the way?
Subsidising Labor's program. Well, nuclear may well be part of the mix. If we were hosting COP, I think one of the benefits would be we would see some of those organisations that support nuclear energy showing their wares. At the last COP, there were 20 nations that signed up to triple the amount of nuclear energy that they would adopt in order to reach a net zero future. This is an opportunity for Labor to see exactly how that those nuclear energy options, those clean nuclear energy options potentially would work.
We'll leave it there, Jane. Good to see you, though, on this Monday morning. See you next week.